Mac Power Users, episode 687, Revisiting Contacts and Calendars. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am joined today by my favorite nerd, Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm great, David. How are you?
It's a wonderful time, man. It's wonderful. The weather's like nice here. The rain has slowed down. California is a weird place. We love the rain. You know, like we've gone full. I don't know, what do you call those guys? The druids. We've gone full druid out here in California. It starts raining. We want to dance around, but now it's kind of stopped, and I think we're okay with that too. But we've had this show on the outline now for like a year and a half. But we do occasionally talk about calendars. This show is going to be primarily about contacts. But the contacts field does move slowly, and I think Mac Power users should have a strategy about dealing with contacts. We're going to be talking about platforms and apps and tips and app. You know, we got the whole thing today, so we got a lot to talk about.
We do. There's a little housekeeping first. In More Power Users this week, More Power Users, by the way, if you don't know, is our longer ad-free version of the show. We do it each and every week. And as a member, you also get a bunch of good, cool goodies over at Relay, like a newsletter and some members-only content. We're going to be doing our members-only special here in the next, it'll be out in the next month or so, sometime in May. And that goes to all members. So if you're a member of Upgrade or Connected or Focused or anything else, you'll get everybody. So it is member time here at Relay FM. I also just wanted to point out, because I've had people ask me, and really this came from listeners emailing me, wanting access to things I had done in my 2 Kickstarters. So I've done 2 Apple History calendars, and they've come with stickers and wallpapers and a bunch of other stuff. I'm working on the 3rd installment as we speak. There'll be a 3rd one available later this year. But people have wanted access to that stuff, because one thing I've done is create like an ICS file, speaking of contacts and calendars today, where you can put those dates in your calendar app. So Fantastical or Apple Calendar or whatever. And previously, those have only been available through the Kickstarter or through BackerKit right afterwards. And I was like, you know what? These should be available year round. So I've set up a little web store where you can get those calendars. You can get the wallpapers that I've made of the photographs and a couple other things I've made over the years, kind of all in one place. And so there's a link in the show notes if you want to check that out. If that sounds interesting, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, sometimes opening a calendar can be like a dread, right? What's the calendar going to tell me I have to do today? And there is a source of joy in your calendar when it tells you it's the anniversary of the iMac or something fun. So I actually really like that you made that, and I've got it installed on mine.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And, you know, I work on these, but I don't know how, David, are you this way when you make something like it's out of your brain? Like you say something on a podcast and 2 weeks later, you don't remember having said it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Especially when you have multiple. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way with the calendar. I'll say like, oh, this is when the Power Mac G4 got the first super drive or whatever. So it's a lot of fun for me too. And go check it out.
Probably the most popular calendar inside, Apple Park. It has to be, right?
I know for a fact there are quite a few hanging in Apple Park and Infinite Loop around town in Cupertino, which is cool. Sometimes I got an email from someone actually just a few weeks ago, I think, maybe about a month ago, and it was a picture of the calendar with a date circled, and it was like, I worked on this, and it was some ancient, I forget what it was, some ancient like QuickTime thing in the 90s, right? Something no one remembers, that probably wasn't, that widely used at the time, because, the Mac was really small in the 90s. Be like, hey, I worked on this and here it is. That made me happy. I want to bring happiness to people.
Yes. Well, when Tim Cook does his weekly call to me this week, I'll ask him if he has one for his wall. And if he doesn't, I'm going to tell him to go to ismh.gumroad.com and then he can get one.
Yeah, he can get a digital version. For Tim, okay, no one else listen to this, but Tim, I have a handful of physical ones left. I'm not selling physical ones anymore. I just have a handful left to replace ones that got lost or whatever. But I'll send you one out of the reserve if you're Tim Cook.
There we go. Yeah, right. All right. Contacts. I did want to talk about contacts again. It's been a while since we really kind of gave it serious coverage on the show. You were not on the show the last time we talked about contacts, and as the Apple history guy, I know in the outline here you've got some history stuff we need to talk about with contacts and digital contacts.
Yeah, I was just thinking back through my own usage. I mean, now I'm on iCloud and I've been, there for a long time, but before the iPhone, this is years and years ago, like 20 years ago, I had a series of devices, as you do, right? I had a couple of Palm Pilots. I had a Windows Pocket PC for a little while. Dude, just a little side effect. Pocket PC was a legit platform. It was awesome.
It was a dumpster fire. I tried one and it was terrible.
No, we disagree on this. It was great. Even a Newton for a while. And I just had this flashback to this app called The Missing Sync. It was by a company called Markspace. They're still around.
I remember that app.
Yeah,
Yes.
Missing Sync's long gone. But it would run on your Mac. It was kind of like iSync. iSync would sync your contacts and calendars to your iPod or various mobile phones. But The Missing Sync was that for like Palm OS and Pocket PC and these other things. And I just remember the first couple of times I did that, I was like, oh, I can have all my contacts like with me, because, when I came up, it was, you sort of had your contacts on your computer, and then like you had, your most important contacts that you hand entered on your cell phone, right? Like your old Nokia. It's like beep, 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 putting them in. And when suddenly I could sync them and I could have all of my stuff everywhere, it was incredible. And of course, we just expect that now, right? We expect that, oh, David changes his phone number, or a friend of mine moves back in town and I update their contact card, that it's instantly synced to all of my devices. And that's how it should work now. But it definitely wasn't always this way. It's been a road to get here. And boy, I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I was a little older than you. So when I first started in business, as they say, I had a paper calendar, which is kind of interesting. In these days, there's a lot of press back towards analog. People who read books in analog, people who do their task managers in analog. I don't hear anybody talking about going back to contact management analog.
No.
That's something where digital really, really is better. But I, at one point, got my hands on, it was called the Casio BN10, a business navigator. Ooh. And it was some glorious, 80s era tech. And that was, I think, the first time I got my contacts digital. And it was a game changer for me. I mean, yeah. I had a lot of contacts, and being able to access them anywhere and update them, that's a good thing. I've told the story on the show many times over the years. That's another problem with making a podcast for a long time. But at one point, I had the Palm Pilot, and the contacts would duplicate themselves. It was a known bug with the operating system. It was not like a weird fluke. It just happened, and there was an app that would deduplicate them. I think it was called Dedupe, and it was like $50. Talk about people complaining about app costs. It was like $50 for an app. All it did is look through your contacts and deleted duplicates. But if you didn't buy the app, you were in trouble, because it would duplicate on itself every few weeks. It would like cascade. So if you didn't fix it, you'd have like 10, or actually it'd be a factor of 2. It'd be like 16 of each of your contacts after a month. Those were the days, baby.
Yeah. Deduplication, still a problem. We're still dealing with it, but now it's just a feature in a bunch of these apps.
Well, back then it was just, that was a thing. And they're like, oh yeah, it just does that sometimes. And it wasn't like outrage. If Apple Contacts app did that now, that would be a big problem. Yeah. We would not be making a show where we'd be talking about an app that does things like that. But back then, those types of bugs, I think, were far more common. So anyway, this has been a digital problem people have been trying to solve for a long time. I have to ask, though, how much of your contact data did you do on the Newton? Because I know you were a big Newton guy.
Yeah, there were a couple of apps that ran on OS X back in the day that would sync contacts and calendars with the Newton. It was mostly because I thought I was like a cool retro hipster. And even in those days, and even today, honestly, most of my contact management happens on the Mac. I mean, even then, Yeah, I'll like whip out and like add someone's phone number to my phone, or if someone sends, I love the feature where you can share a contact card via iMessage. Underrated feature in my mind. And
Yeah.
I'll add it on my phone. But when it's time to like clean stuff up or do real management, I've always been a Mac first kind of user.
But the real, in addition to like our trip down memory lane, the real, I think, tipping point was when we got the ability to have contacts in multiple locations. Because before that, my parents' generation, if you lost your address book, you were up a creek. I mean, there wasn't much you could do unless you had copied everything twice and put it in a separate place.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that, where people would like lose their address book, and then they'd have to like call around and try and find it. Do you have Jason's number? I
Right. Yeah.
lost, and that was a thing. And then so the tipping point, getting to where I was going with this, is when you had the idea that you could have it on mobile, but you could also have it on your Mac. And if you lost either one, you were fine. I mean, you'd have to buy something to see it again, but the data bits were there. You didn't have to call your friends and ask for Jason's phone number. And that's nice. But, again, we expect more than that. And at this point, there are different contact platforms out there available to people. We're going to focus primarily on iCloud today because both of us use iCloud. But there are a lot of listeners that are not using iCloud. I mean, for various reasons. Like when I used to work at the law firm, we worked on Exchange,
Mm-hmm.
and that was before Microsoft 365, but it was basically their version. And so I had some in iCloud and some in Exchange. And one of the questions you need to ask yourself as you're getting serious about this is, what platform am I going to choose?
It's sometimes forced on you, right? Now, thankfully, Apple's own OSs and a bunch of third-party apps, you can have multiple platforms in play at once. So you can have your iCloud for your personal and maybe your work Exchange, and those contacts are there as well, and you can view them separately or view them together. You can do different things depending on the apps that you're using. But we do have a lot of options. For me, I have most of this kind of data in iCloud. It, for many, many years, has been really solid for me. I know it's not always solid for everybody, but I haven't had any real scary moments with it. And so I've used iCloud for years and years, and it's been fine.
Yeah, every time contacts comes up on the show, I hear from one listener who has had a horror story where contacts, ate, or not contacts the app, but the iCloud platform chewed up their contacts and altered data or lost it or whatever. But when we talk about the alternative platforms, I get emails about that too, about the time Google lost their data or Microsoft Exchange chewed up their data. I think this happens occasionally. Like you, I've been fortunate; it's never happened to me. But the apps we're recommending today, we got several we're going to talk about. All of them recognize multiple sync platforms, and they all have a backup function. And I have a checklist. As you do, it's set on a timer, and about every 6 months, I get a thing that says back up your contacts, and I hit the button and back them up, and I feel pretty good about it. And so I've got them in iCloud. I've got them in a backup. I just think I'm fine. And I wouldn't be hesitant to use any of the platforms we're talking about today. Google probably is the most frequently used backbone of contacts from the people in our circles. And we're, deal with a lot of tech-friendly people. But I think probably the biggest one might be Microsoft 365 because it is so embedded in corporate America and businesses.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when I was like doing Apple consulting, we ran, then it was an Exchange server, it's kind of the same thing under the hood. But yeah, it's everywhere. And like I said, thankfully Apple's devices let you have multiple accounts set up. But even if you want to go off the beaten path, though, so something like CardDAV, which is it's similar to CalDAV, which is basically a server protocol for syncing calendars and contacts. So CalDAV, CardDAV, iOS and macOS support that as well. That's a bit on the newer side, and some providers like Fastmail, which I know we have a lot of listeners using, they use CardDAV to sync that. So you have a lot of options now, even if you're not using one of the mainstream players.
Yeah, can I go down a little rabbit hole for a second?
Please.
Microsoft 365 is really impressing me lately. And I'm not using it anymore. I canceled my subscription. But for about an hour last week, I thought about putting my whole team on it because they just continue to do this cool stuff. They're embracing the AI tools. I want to kind of play with that. They've got a new app called Loop. Have you seen this?
Yeah,
it's kind of like
Notion, but also it's kind of like it's also kind of like OpenDoc. Like the idea is you have little parts of documents inside each other.
Yeah, and like my wife is working in it a lot, and like she has set up her database in OneNote that she shares with her team, and it's actually really. It's not like the old days where the Mac was a second-class citizen with Microsoft stuff. At this point, I feel like their kind of Windows and Mac platforms are on a pretty even playing field. And I don't have a lot of experience with it. And, it was one of those things you're like, oh, that would be kind of fun to do that. Then I realized, oh, why would I do that? That's dumb. Everything's working. The whole team understands craft. Why would I move it around? But but that's just kind of one of my failings, right? I always looking for the new thing. But 5 years ago, I never would have said I thought about using Windows or not Windows, Microsoft's platform for this stuff. But anyway, this is a little aside. If you're out there and you're thinking about this stuff, Microsoft is making some pretty good products these days.
They are.
Anyway, so you got Microsoft, Google, Apple, and then the card dev gives anybody that's capable of putting together a good sync engine. And Fastmail, honestly, is a great option. I am so happy with my move to Fastmail for the business. My only regret is not doing it sooner. I've now been in it about a couple of years, and I've built a ton of online rules, and it's just been really great experience for me. And why not put your contact database up there too?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that go into that decision making. I mean, when we get to calendars a little bit later on, I keep personal calendars and then like my public facing work calendars separate, but I don't do that with contacts, right? All my work and personal contacts, they're all mixed in my iCloud, and that's fine for me as a small business owner. Like I can make those decisions on my own, but a lot of times when you're looking at where do you want your contacts to be, you do have some limitations on that. I think a big one is some of the features on the server side. So one of my favorite things about Google Contacts is if you go to those contacts, it has the ones that you've synced to that account, but it also keeps a list of suggested contacts of people it is noticed in your inbox, and it will put cards together for them, and you can then say, "Oh, I want to add this person." As a contact, or I want to keep them in suggested contacts. Apple Mail does a little bit of this with its previous recipients function, where if I've sent a message to an email address or I've gotten it from an email address, it will remember that. But if that's a feature that is enticing to you, well, and you're already in the Google ecosystem, well, that could be a pull in that direction. I think the other thing is, do you need access to them online? Almost all of these have that. But iClouds, I would argue, is probably the weakest, especially out of Microsoft 365 and Google. And
definitely,
if you do a lot of online stuff with your contacts and calendars and mail, do you really want to be stuck using iCloud.com all the time? I personally don't. I want something that's more powerful. So these are all things that kind of go into that decision matrix for me.
Yeah. I mean, some of the big factors is, are you working alone or with others? And if you're working with others, you've got to find something that handles syncing and sharing, which iCloud isn't particularly good at. It's not really what it was designed for. I think Google and Microsoft have better solutions for that, kind of the nature of the beast. Another kind of angle of that matrix is, are you on multiple platforms or a single platform? Like you and I are, we're in the Apple ecosystem, and I make decisions based on that. But if I had to work in Windows during the day and Apple at night, I don't think that I would want to use iCloud for my contacts because, I'm going to have problems when I'm over on Windows. And I know that Apple has, done some work with iCloud sync on Windows,
but it's limited.
And I feel like that's probably a pretty small team, whereas The
Do you think they're in Apple
Google
Park, or do you think they're in some sort of faceless office building somewhere else in Cupertino?
that I think they're in behind. If you go to Cupertino, there's a Joe's Crab Shack, and I think if you go behind the bathroom of Joe's Crab Shack, there's a
Oh,
closet, and that's where the people work on the iCloud sync for Windows.
for Windows. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like with contacts and calendar information, iCloud will only sync it with Outlook. So, if you want to use Outlook, that's awesome. But if you don't want to use Outlook, you want to use something else, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. So, platform choice matters. Automation matters too. I think contacts is something that's ripe for automation. If you listen to the stuff I do, I'm a big fan of trying to get the computer to do the work for me. But they're very different kinds of automations based on contacts. Like Stephen was talking about earlier, the Google feature where it grabs contacts, it reads your mail. I mean, let's just acknowledge that. Read your mail, said, oh yeah, here's somebody that may want to be in your contact. And we've got a whole back-end system on the cloud that figures that out for you and offers them up to your contact cards. That's an automation. And apps like, Google Contacts are going to be better at that than iCloud. But one of the big draws for me to iCloud Sync is that I am a fan of local automation, where I write a shortcut or a keyboard meister script or something like that. And I want to use local-based automation where it's just syncing my data without putting it on the cloud, but then give me automation tools. And iCloud is actually really good at that because the Contacts app has a lot of hooks into shortcuts. So it just depends. Not only do you want to automate, but what kind of automation do you want to do? And you just got to kind of think through, do you want to spend money? I mean, that's another thing. If you're getting into a 365 installation for a team, you're going to spend some significant money, more than you probably would for the other platforms. But then you get those benefits. So you've got to kind of think through all this stuff. For me, I can tell you that historically, I've always done my personal stuff in iCloud because I like the Apple platforms. And we're going to talk later about the cool stuff we're doing with the Contacts app. So you might as well use this Apple's backbone too. It's been stable for me. But I was on Exchange for work. And when I left the firm and made my own little law practice during that 7 or 8 years, I had them in iCloud. What I did was I used groups, we're going to talk about that later too. So, you can kind of evolve your view of it, but you do have to pick a platform. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by TextExpander. With TextExpander, you can get started automating today. A lot of people ask me how to get started with automation, and I feel like TextExpander is probably the best way to do that because it allows you to automate text. Everybody writes text. We all find ourselves writing repeated text all the time, which is real drudgery, and that's where automation can help. TextExpander is an automation tool. With TextExpander, you can develop snippets that fill in things like your address and your phone number. But if you want to take it further, you can really go a long way with TextExpander because it really does support automation. For instance, with TextExpander, you can have it automatically put in today's date and time, or you can have it automatically include the contents of a clipboard. That one's a real good one for me. I've used that a lot over the years. I've got some bit of information I want to include in form text. Well, I just put that information in like an Apple note. I copy it, and then I trigger a TextExpander snippet, and it dumps the clipboard right into the text for me. It is super useful and super accurate. And, that's what automation is supposed to do, right? Make things faster and more accurate. TextExpander does that for you. If you want to go deeper and do AppleScript or use rich text, whatever you want to do with text, TextExpander can do it for you. And best of all, TextExpander is available on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad, so it follows you around in whatever platform you're in. And show listeners get 20% off their first year. Just go to textexpander.com/MPU and start automating your text today. You'll be shocked at how much time you save. In fact, they let you know. The application tracks your typing speed and how much time you save. And I literally save days every year just using TextExpander to write text for me. I love this application. It is a great on-ramp towards automation. That URL one last time, textexpander.com/MPU. Go there, get 20% off your first year, and show your support for the show. Thanks again, TextExpander, for all of your support of the Mac Power Users.
So let's pick up and talk a little bit about Apple's Contacts app. because it's been around for a long time and it's pretty basic. It definitely hasn't gotten the love that Reminders or Notes or some of these other programs have gotten.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the kind of renaissance of Apple productivity apps, and we have never mentioned contacts in those discussions.
Yeah.
It's not great. I mean, it does the job. It gives you a contact. It integrates well with the operating system. I think that's something that it doesn't get credit for. When you go to fill in a contact name, whether it's in a search or in an Apple Mail field or whatever, all the data is there. It finds it and it gives it to you. We're going to talk about some power tips later, but like one of the cool things I love is the way I can click on a contact in a mail and add them as a contact card, which should be really table stakes for anything like this, but they do it well. And over the years, it's gotten enough polish with that feature that it's quite useful. But it's also a very inefficient app. I think that's the thing about it that kills me the most is like if Steven tells me he gets a new phone number, the amount of clicks and taps I have to do to get it in there is just maddening.
Yeah, that's something we've complained about in Reminders too, but it is really bad in Contacts. There's really there's no way around it. You're just doing a lot of modal stuff and you go into this edit mode and you come back out of it and it's kind of easy to get lost in what you're doing. I wish all of that could be simplified in Contacts. And I should say this is mostly about Contacts on the Mac. On the iPhone though, it's not too dissimilar. It's basically the same as it's always been. It's a lot of tapping. There's no real natural language stuff. Again, it gets the job done. And what I should say about it in its defense, maybe, or in the defense of the OS at least, is if you're using a third-party contacts app, which we're going to talk about in a little while, because they're all syncing, you can still get the benefit of like the built-in integration with Mail or with Safari or these other things, to add to contacts, those sorts of things. But so you can get different ways into it. But I think a lot of people just use the default. I certainly do. I've got a bunch of contacts apps on my Mac now because of this episode. But I've been a contacts app user for a long time. And way back, it had stitched leather for a while. It was brushed metal before that. Contacts has had a weird life.
Yeah, the user interface is like a whole nother discussion. But before we get to that, just like, for example, I've got your contact card open right now, and I hit the edit button. If I want to go through, say you send me a note that you want to change your email and your phone number, I mean, most apps these days would let you hit a tab key to move between fields while you're doing editing or arrow keys or something. It just doesn't. You've got to go and click the mouse, and then sometimes you've got to take the mouse and select the data. You can't just like select it all. I just feel like it's in molasses, the whole thing. Trying to get things done quickly are not great. And the thing that bothers me the most is because I use a lot of groups, as I would, right? Mm-hmm. You can't put them in a group with a keyboard. You have to finish the contact, and you have to go. Sometimes, like if you add the contact from a mail message, which is the most frequent way I'll add a contact. I get an email from somebody. I'm like, oh, I should be able to, reach out to this person. Click the button, add to contacts, right? There's no way there to pick which group they're in. So then I have to go to the app. Then I have to go to the all button. Then I have to search for the person. Then I have to find them, then grab them with the mouse, drag them to the group I want them in, hope that I land on the right group, because sometimes when you're mousing, you hit the wrong group. And it's just, the whole thing just feels to me like molasses. And that could be so much better.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is slow and error prone. I do think there are a couple of good things about it.
Yeah.
I am a pretty big fan of its ability, and other apps have this too, to have customizable fields. So you can go into its settings and you can say, okay, when I create a new contact, these are the fields I want available. Like maybe I don't care about someone's Twitter link. Well, I can uncheck that. But if I really want job title to always be there or department to always be there, you can add that to the template. Again, other apps have copied this, but I do think it's a pretty useful thing because there's some data that some people really care about, and there's other data that people just don't. And you can customize it to what you want.
Yeah, agreed. And I actually, getting back to the UI question, I like the new UI. It's very simple, and I think that's perfect for a contacts app. And the stitched leather was cool, and the way it's reflected the user interface of the Mac over the years is nice. But the current iteration of it, I don't find offensive at all. And I don't want my contacts app to be sexy. I just want it to be fast and efficient. And it's the fast and efficient part that I sometimes bump my head against.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit. So both of us are using the contacts app as our primary contacts manager, correct?
Yep, I am.
Yeah, me too. So let's talk about that. What are you doing in the app?
Mostly just adding things. I have 830 contacts. I was scrolling through them as we were preparing. There's people in here I don't even remember. Like everyone I've ever worked with, any job I've ever had, still in here. Things just don't come out of my contacts. I mean, I will go in there and do editing, when I need to, but it's pretty static. I feel like I don't ever go in and obviously clean things up, and I just kind of add things to the pile,
Yeah. Well, I had 2 lives, so I win. I have 1773. That's the number of contacts I have. And it's just, I practiced law for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I have all those contacts in there. And then I use a lot of groups. And that was for me, I think anybody listening to this, if you're not using groups with contacts, this is an opportunity to bring order from chaos. And this is something that can really be helpful. Now, on the Mac in particular, you've got the standard groups and you've got smart groups. I mean, the whole smart group system that Apple has on the Mac, it's a big gripe of mine that stuff hasn't all just found its way, or they call it a smart list, I'm sorry, in contacts. It's a gripe to me that stuff just hasn't found its way over to the mobile devices. There must be a technical problem. But if I make a smart group on the in contacts for my Mac, I should be able to see it elsewhere.
Yeah. Or create one on the go, right?
Yeah, or even just have one. Right, exactly. So their solution for several years now has been, well, we're making some for you. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted to be able to make my own. And but kind of getting back to the thread, I really think the groups can be really helpful when you get a big contact database. Like, because I practice law, I have one called attorneys. And in that one, I've got a bunch of people listed. There's 216 attorneys in here. And I need to probably go and start cleaning that up. I collected it over the years, and I'm not doing that business anymore. And a few of these people will stick around, but they don't necessarily need to be in my database anymore. Now, are they doing any damage being in my database? Probably not. If I've got, Joe Blow in here, who I had a case with 10 years ago, I suspect he'll never call me again. But if he did, his name would show up. If I take him out of the database, he doesn't. So, so I have this thought that I'm going to clean it out, but I never really quite do that. The way I access them on the Mac is I just search it. And interestingly, you can search by group, which is kind of nice if you get a big database.
Yeah.
But I am very liberal with these groups. So I sent you a screenshot. So like some of the areas, like for the personal stuff, I have friends, family, and personal business. Now, a lot of people would make that all one group, personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like when I want to look up the guy who fixed my water heater, I have all those vendors that do stuff for me like that in their personal business. And that allows me to go in through there and kind of scroll through and find it, or just search that group if I want. And because of the number of contacts I have, it makes the search results really good. And I do friends and family separate, and it's just weird, right? But I also have one called Family Christmas Cards. And that one is a smart list. And all that is, it's a smart list that I made. And if the word holiday card, there's 2 of them. There's one that says holiday card and holiday e-card. And if one of those 2 words appears, then they show up in that smart list. And I'm strategically using the notes field. So I'm able to like really slice and dice through this data really quickly. I've got a group of day one journals that are contacts, because one of the nice things with day one is you can send an email to a specific address and it shows up in a day one journal.
Yes.
So I've just got a group of those. And like one of them is Max Sparky Love. And for those of you who write me really nice notes, I'm telling you, those are going into my day one. And someday when I'm old and drooling in myself, that will be the only day one journal I read. So thank you for sending those to me. You'll keep me going. But anyway, so I do that through a group. And so I've been really, over the years, very careful. Like I have one called Clients, which obviously I don't have any clients anymore, but I've still got the list. Because I do some screencasting and stuff, I have a couple that have entirely fictional people in it that I can use when I do a screencast. And
Right.
so I've, and over the years, I've just kind of grown it organically as I need it. Another one is referrals. It's a bunch of attorneys who I trust enough to send people to. And so if people write me and say, I need an estate planning attorney, I have some people in there that I think I can send them to, but I've got them grouped together. And each one of those people in all of these fields was manually dragged with my mouse from a list to that thing. And that's, I think, why a lot of people don't do it. I think the barrier is there that stops them from using the groups. But I would recommend, if you're using Apple Contacts and you've got a database of more than 100 people, you should really consider putting those groups together, because you find all sorts of uses for them. And I could go on about this. Well, let me say one more thing.
Okay.
Apple allows you to use the groups contextually in other applications. Like I have some people that are early beta testers for some field guides. I've got a group of those. Well, when I want to send them that early access, I write an email to field guide beta testers, and everybody on that list gets the email, and I don't have to go in and type each one individually. So there's a lot of really cool features like that once you have the groups, you can use them elsewhere. That's why I'm so, annoyed that they don't let me use those groups in focus modes, because I feel like this would be another great use of those groups.
Yeah, it is definitely frustrating that they haven't extended this out to the other parts of the system. But I do agree with you. Groups are hugely useful. I don't have as many as you, but I do have several. I chuckled at your day one journals. I have one called Robots. And so it's like the email address to send to Feedbin or to send to Kindle, right? Various to-do apps have like you can forward an email to it and it goes in the inbox. And I keep all those there, right? They're all in one place and it's easy to find them and oh, what is that email address? Go look it up. So the groups are huge. I do want to touch on something you said, because I think it's, out of everything I could say about contacts, it's like the my soapbox is use the notes field, because ultimately you're going to forget, the name of the guy who fixed your hot water heater, or you're going to need to talk to somebody you haven't talked to in a while, and you're going to need to remember some detail about your, previous relationship or whatever it is. And I use contact notes for that all the time. I have a text expander snippet that puts the date in, and then I put a little colon, and I just write a sentence or two, whatever it is. And it's saved my bacon a couple times. So the example I like to use is the guy who put our gate in across our driveway. He's in there, right? And I could have put him, like his first name's also Steven, so it's confusing, but Steven, gate guy, and then his last name. Well, I have gate guy in the note, because I know, I'm going to search gate in my contacts when I need him in 2 years when it needs a repair or something. But then I also have in there, like, okay, this is the date that it went in, and he was out here, this date, and he came back this date for maintenance. And when I communicate with him in the future, that means I don't have to go look in Apple Notes or something else. You could put that a bunch of different places. For me, it clicks. For someone I really only interact with transactionally, just put that on their contact card. And it is fantastic, because that does sync everywhere. And you can search for it, and you can build smart groups off of that. I've got a consulting client of mine who, she's a big note taker in her contacts. She's actually the one who kind of opened my eyes to this. And dating way back to like the Palm days, she was using this. And she uses it to build her holiday gift list. So she has like a tag, or, in the notes field, it's not really tagging in contacts, but, in-town holiday, out-of-town holiday. And she can go in and just make those adjustments to people's contact cards throughout the year. And then when it's time to print her holiday card, she just prints from the smart list. And it's really powerful. And you can fit it in however you want to, but I really think it's underutilized by most people.
I've got a note here. I was just looking at. First of all, I agree 100%. It's really what I call a poor man's CRM. Right, you can put any kind of data you want in there. And I was just looking in my attorney field. There's a guy that I had a thing I did with for a client years ago, and in the notes field it says the case that we worked on together and the name of his client, the name of my client, so I could search the client name and find him. But it also says here, daughter : Alicia, Game of Thrones freak. So it's like, and I don't even really remember how that came up, but somehow he started talking to me about Game of Thrones. I thought, well, if I need to talk to him again, I can ask him how Alicia's doing, or what he thought about Game of Thrones. So it's just like you can use so much with that note. So now what Stephen was talking about was more of like a kind of an activity list, where you date stamp things, but you can also put biographical notes about them. And I get that there are much better apps at stuff like this. In fact, one of the alternative apps for contacts is Daylight, which is to run your whole business on a CRM system. And they're way better at that. And there's great online tools for that. That's not really what this show's about today. But for, your personal stuff, I think this is the way to go. For a while, when I was still in my honeymoon phase with Obsidian, I moved some of this. I didn't move it, but I duplicated it over in Obsidian, because in Obsidian, you get obsessed with links the more you use it. You're like, okay, if I do it with Stephen Hackett, then I want to have all that information in Obsidian. And ultimately, I didn't stick with it because I just don't want Obsidian to be that noisy. And I would prefer to put that stuff in Contacts database. The sync is awesome. It's on all your devices. You can go into Spotlight, type in a name, and get notes on a person very quickly. It sounds a little creepy, right? That you're writing down the name of his daughter and that he likes Game of Thrones, but it allows you to have a jump start with that person the next time you're on the phone with them.
There's a scene in The Office where Michael Scott, his contact cards are taken by somebody else.
Okay.
Like, they're reading the back of it and they make no sense. Like his notes to himself about, people's kids or where they went to school or something. And I feel like if someone came across mine or yours, maybe they'd have similar vibes of like, I don't know what this person's talking about.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I will say, like, if you go to share a contact, maybe take the notes field out,
Yeah.
Copy
that's
that,
the problem.
send the contact, and then paste it back in.
Yeah. You like, because the referrals is a good example. When I refer people to an attorney, I will write down that I referred Stephen Hackett on, April 7th or whatever. And and if someone asks me in the future for a referral to that person, I'm very careful not to share the card, because I don't want them to see a list of people I've referred to that person. I'll just give them the phone number or write an introductory email. But like, even for you, I've got like your preferred PayPal address here, because I know at some point I must have sent you money, and I wrote it down. It was probably for that payoff, that time you had that information about me, but we're not recording, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, either way, it's something, right? But I've just got weird bits of information attached to a lot of these cards. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think this is a great use. Getting back to the idea of a tagging system, you said it's not a real tagging system, but it could be. All you have to do is I use a pound symbol, right? For common ones like referrals, like pound referral is anybody that I might refer business to. And then I can just type pound referral estate planning, and then that'll get me that list of people. Now you can also have them in a referrals list, but then you can use a smart list that just searches for pound referrals and puts it together automatically for you. So it gives you a couple different ways to skin the cat. But I think that notes field is something a lot of people don't use as well as they could. And if you don't have a CRM system, well, guess what you do? It's right there. Just start using it.
Mm-hmm. A couple of other, I think, useful things when dealing with contacts that really span a bunch of different applications. The duplicate detection is a big deal, right? It can be inevitable that either you have a sync issue or, you thought you had somebody's didn't have someone's contact, so your spouse sends you their card, and then you have two of them. So Contacts on the Mac has duplicate detection built in. A lot of third-party apps do as well. Contacts does it in a visual way where it shows you the two cards. It kind of gives you some options about what you want to do, which I like. I don't want it to blindly merge things. I would like to know what it's going to do and kind of lead it by the hand. And I ran it on mine, and I only had one out of however many. What did I say? 800 something contacts, 700 something contacts. But sometimes you end in a situation where you have a lot going on in there, and it can be a nice way to clean things up. Because Contacts ties into mail and messages and all these other things, you end up with duplicates kind of exposing themselves in weird ways, right? It's like, this text came from David Sparks or Dave Sparks. Like, okay, well, that's one dude. I can put them together and my notifications are cleaner, right? So I'm pretty allergic to having duplicates in my contacts.
Yeah. And that's like you like immediately swat it down when you see it.
Exactly.
Agreed. Yeah. I think that's a nice feature. And that was well done, right? We've already talked about how you can capture it from email. I'm not super excited about the editing, but the number of available fields is impressive, right? I mean, if you want to add different fields or change them, they've done a good job of kind of evolving the format over the years.
Yeah. There's things in here that weren't around when it used to be called Address Book, when Address Book was invented, right? Like, there wasn't a Twitter field in Mac OS X Tiger. The labels have also changed, right? So iPhone can be a label now for someone's phone number instead of just mobile or home or work. You can have FaceTime in there. You can do home and work email addresses. So they have done a good job, I think, of keeping up with the times and allowing contact records to better reflect how we get in touch with people.
We've covered the smart list, but I think the real trick to making smart lists working for you is my kind of hybrid tagging system. I mean, that's the best way to do it, right? But you can also have smart lists relate to other lists, so you can really combine them and slice and dice them. But again, all this stuff is on the Mac, and that makes me a little sad.
Yeah, it's a bummer. My last sort of advice or tip or trick to share is don't be afraid to create temporary contacts. So I fudged a little bit earlier when I said I don't ever delete things. I will create contacts, for instance, WWDC 23 hotel, right? So the hotel I'm staying at in June, I will make a contact and I have their phone number and the address. I usually put my reservation number in the notes field. And, I could favorite that in Maps, but that's like an extra step if I just need to call the front desk and tell them that I'm going to be checking in late and not to give my room away, right? And then at the end of the trip, I just go in there, and if it's a place I may stay again, I'll keep it, but usually it's not. And, if it's a one-off trip, and I'll just kind of have it as a temporary thing. I think that can be especially useful when you combine them with lists. So if you're going on a trip and you need, several contacts of different places, create a list for your trip, and it's just all right there together, and then you can unwind it all when you get home.
Yeah, that is like a killer tip if you've never done it before. But anytime you go out of town, create a list. And the lists are free, right? Even though like I've got a group of friends, you can still make even further subgroups on that if you want. It doesn't matter, right? So go crazy with the list. There's no cost to it. But the nice thing about a trip-based list is that you can, at the end, just delete it if you want. And while you're on the trip, you can just go and have that as your active contact list. I mean, it does remember if you're in a group on your phone, it remembers what group you're in. So then every time you open contacts, it's on that trips list. So you just see the 5 or 6 places or contacts that you particularly need, and you're right there.
Could you talk a little bit about mail merge? I feel like this is a feature that I've never really used, and so it's hard for me to explain it. But could you walk through this?
Well, I mean, it's really a Pages feature more than it's a contacts feature, but it allows you to write a Pages document and access data out of your contacts groups And it's got a kind of a sordid history. It was there, but then I don't know if you recall, about 5-ish years ago, Apple unified the code base for Pages and Numbers and Keynote. So it lost they all lost features, but it allowed them to develop the app across mobile and Mac platforms at the same time. Well, it went away, and that made a lot of people sad, you know, because
also, dude, that was 10 years ago. It was in 2013.
Oh man,
that's not good.
Yeah. Well, time goes fast when you're having fun, and I'm having a lot of fun. But either way, so a lot of people got cranky about that, but it came back, and now it's in again. And so you can use contacts as a source for mail merge in Pages. That's all I really wanted to say, is that it's back if you didn't know. And if you want to use it for your Christmas cards or what have you, there you go. Another Christmas card trick I would recommend is make a special field called Christmas card address. And what I mean by that is the first line of the address. A lot of times if you use contacts as a source for printing out Christmas card labels, it'll say, send the card to David Sparks instead of the Sparks family, right? And it's weird to get it. So you can make a custom field for the addressee and make it like the family name or whatever. I don't do a lot with that. My wife really enjoys writing out the cards and the addresses, but what I do is we print the list out from contacts, which is all gathered together by a note, by note field tags in essence. And then she can go through and she handwrites them out. But, if you want to do it with labels, you can, but I would recommend adding a custom field so it doesn't look so impersonal.
This episode of MPU is made possible by our friends over at 1Password. A password manager that means you can keep all of your logins, account information, and secure notes safe and sound on all your devices. 1Password syncs across everything in my life: my laptop, my phone, my tablet, my PC. And I know that wherever I am, I can quickly get to that information because, of course, 1Password works in any browser that I want to use. And on my devices with Face ID and Touch ID, it works there as well. And if you use 1Password at work, good news. The preview that 1Password has been running with Okta is now available to all 1Password business customers. If you're in an environment where Okta is your single sign-on provider, you can now unlock 1Password with Okta instead of your account password. And they have support for other single sign-on providers coming soon. This is one thing I really love about 1Password. They put features in to work with as many people as possible. So you've got this, but you also have 1Password for families, which means my wife and I can share logins to our shared bank account and our utility bill and our mortgage company. All the stuff we need together for the family to run smoothly is also in 1Password, right next to my work vault with all my stuff for Relay FM. So head on over to onepassword.com/MPU to learn more and to sign up for a free 30-day trial. And when you do sign up, you'll get 20% off. Once again, that URL, onepassword.com/MPU.
Okay, there are other apps, though, to manage your contacts. One of the most popular is CardHop from FlexiBits. We had Michael Simmons on the show earlier this year. I mean, FlexiBits is really known for Fantastical. That's their kind of flagship app. But they took all of that natural language tech and they applied it to a contacts app several years ago. I'm not going to say how many because I'm sure I will get it wrong. But all the things we were complaining about, how hard it is to edit and add contacts with the Contacts app, are fixed with FlexiBits CardHop.
Yeah.
That's the short version. Yeah.
The natural language stuff is really cool. And it's not just for creating contacts. So you can start typing the word email. So if I type email and then DAV, it says, oh, do you want to email David Sparks or David Smith or any other Davids I have in my contact list? So you can use it almost like a launcher out of your contacts database. Like there's not really anything like this. I guess it's kind of like drafts, or like text goes in one place and you send it elsewhere. But
it's also kind of like Alfred,
kind of like Alfred. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really pretty awesome. The other thing you can do is if you start typing, and so say I start typing David, and then I start the last name with L and say I don't have David L, anybody in my contacts, it will assume correctly that I'm actually wanting to create a new contact and then kind of give me that UI. It's super fast, super well done. And once you kind of learn its language, it really makes contacts feel clunky.
Yeah, and the actually had some involvement. I did the videos for them when they first released it, and I told them there was one feature I wanted, and it made it in. If I type Stephen Hackett and then I type the pound sign, once it finds your contact card, then it gives me a list of all of my groups, and I can just mouse over or arrow key over, or it just type the name of the group I want to put it in, and it automatically puts you in the group.
Oh,
so
that's
the
cool.
problem I was talking about with all the dragging and everything goes away with it. They have a timestamp. I mean, this is really an improvement over Apple Contacts in almost every way.
Yeah.
Like they have a timestamp feature in the notes field, so you don't need to run a text expander snippet. You just click the button and it adds a timestamp if you want to keep notes on it. And it all looks at the same database as your contacts app, so you can use it at the same time. I use this app tactically. I probably should use it more than I do. But when I need to like do something to a contact, I will do it in CardHop. I don't dig into the CardHop or contacts database that often as I'm working. That data shows up in other places, either through Alfred or the mail app or whatever. But I use these apps to make sure the data is good, but actually execute and use the data elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. CardHop is also available on iOS and iPadOS, and really it's very similar across them. Like once you kind of learn what it can do with the natural language, you can do it everywhere. I feel like we're trending Mac specific on this episode, but it is available elsewhere.
Yeah, and it is and you can act on data there just like you can on the Contacts app. Like you'll note on the Contacts app when you select an email field, a little envelope shows up next to it. You click on that, it opens an email. This does that as well, but it allows you to execute via keyboard as well as mouse. And you can even like custom choose what the actions are you want, because there's a bunch of them you can choose from, whether you want to be invites or calls or whatever. And but it's a nice improvement. It's just what you kind of expect from FlexiBits, them looking at the problems with the existing stuff and tying into it and trying to give you a better user experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really what they're best at.
Another thing I really like about this app is the birthday warnings, and Contacts does this to an extent as well, but I think CardHop does a better job of like the day before birthdays. It always gives me a notification, and I can make sure to make a note to send somebody a birthday greeting or whatever. And I know that's silly. I could also do that with shortcuts, but when the app does it for me and I don't have to write automation for it, that's always kind of ideal.
Oh, yeah. It has a whole celebrations function. And so I can go in here and see birthdays. If I have people's anniversaries, I think that pops in there as well. So I can scroll through like the whole next month and say, oh, this person, this person, and this person have, birthdays coming up. And you can also do that in Calendar. So one of the times between Contacts and Calendar is that you can have birthdays calendar. It pulls all that information over. But I like the way CardHop does it, just because it can send you the notification, and because you can just scroll through really easily. And it's like, oh, when is my sister-in-law's birthday? Oh, it's in July. It's fantastic.
It really comes down to, honestly, if you want Fantastical in your life, because it's part of a FlexiBits subscription, and a lot of people don't want to pay for a calendar and a contacts app, and I get that. And if you are doing fine with what you have, then you shouldn't pay. We talked about Fantastical at length earlier, and my big takeaways for the type of calendaring I'm doing, the extra tools are totally worth the money spent. I mean, I know we've had some of the listeners write in and complain about, well, they raise the price and it's quite expensive, but there's a lot of dumb stuff I spend money on, right? Mm-hmm. And this isn't one of them because the additional features are so useful. And I don't want to get into the calendar features, but they've got like server side stuff they're doing now that it makes a more powerful calendaring system. And since I'm already on board for that, then I've got this as well. That said, I don't use CardHop 100% of the time. I just don't, and I think it's probably a function of habit because I've used contacts for so long. But if I do anything serious, I'll probably do it in CardHop. If anything group related, like a good example is when I click the contextual button in Mail to add a person to contacts, I don't go through the exercise of opening the contacts app and dragging them over anymore. I just open CardHop and I access the person through the CardDAV database, type their name, I hit the pound sign, I put them in the place where they belong. And,
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, it's your feature. You have to use it.
Yeah, I know. Really.
An alternative is Busy Contacts. This is a $50 one-time app, but it's also on SetApp. So if you're a SetApp subscriber, you get access to Busy Contacts. And it is more of a traditional contacts manager than I think CardHop is.
Yeah.
It syncs with all the regular, iCloud, Google Exchange, et cetera, et cetera. But I think my favorite thing about Busy Contacts and playing with it in preparation of this episode is the different views you can get into your contacts. And so by default, it uses a very similar layout to contacts, right? You kind of have your groups, and then you have your contacts, and you have the details. But it also has a view that puts them at the top, like how Apple Mail can and used to do by default, where your message is at the top and the details are below. And that means you get columns. And so I could turn on a column for company and I could sort by that and say, okay, here's everyone in my contacts database that works at, St. Jude. And they're all grouped together because I've sorted by the company. And something about this layout really clicks for me. Again, not something that I would use every day, right? But if you compare it to contacts, well, contacts I'd be searching, right? And then do I make a smart group? Or what do I do? Sometimes I don't need something that's that sort of structural, right? Sometimes I just want to sort by something and it's like, oh, I know this person works at St. Jude. Like, what is their name? And maybe it's in here. It's pretty sweet. And as far as I can tell, unique to Busy Contacts.
No, I agree. And I could see, just knowing your personality, I feel like that view would be like push a lot of buttons for you, right? It's like, perfect. And there is a look to the Busy Cal / Busy Contacts apps. It's got like a UI look, just like the FlexiBits has a look to their apps. And I honestly think that's a big piece of this. Like, it's hard enough getting through life. If you have a contacts or a calendar app that bring you some delight when you work in them, you should definitely use that one.
Yeah.
And again, if you're already paying for SetApp, you already own this app. Just download it and start using it. If not, they've got a trial and you can give it a shot and see what you think. But I do think there is like there's a piece of this that isn't easy to really quantify. And every person is going to be different. Like, oh, I really like the way, CardHop has this look or does this one thing. Like for me, it's group management. CardHop is something that really draws me in. But you say, but I really like the listing in Busy Contacts. Find the features that really like connect with you and just use the one that works for you. The good news is all of these use the same contact database. Well, one of the smartest things Apple did, in my opinion, about all this stuff is they made a third-party app addressable database system. Like, wouldn't it be terrible if you wanted to use Busy Contacts, you had to like export your contacts out of Apple Contacts and then import them there. But then if you wanted to go back, then you'd have to figure out what changed. And it just, all that madness is removed because the foundational building block of contacts and calendars are these basically publicly addressable databases. When I say publicly, I mean on your machine, not on the internet. But it's a database that other apps can source, they can modify. And if you want to go back to the Apple defaults, you don't lose anything. In fact, you can run them both at the same time with no problem.
Yeah. Another feature in Busy Contacts kind of builds on my idea of how I use the notes field. They call it the activity list. It means that if you use BusyCal, you can basically link contacts with calendar events. So if I say lunch with David Sparks and I tag it the right way, then in your contact record, all of our previous lunches would show up there. It can also interface with Apple Mail. It requires a plugin, but you can see your mail history. And rather humorously, here in 2023, it also has Twitter integration, so you can see people's recent tweets if your contact card includes their handle. I would assume that's going to break with the API changes that Twitter's making.
Yeah,
But
I'm surprised it's working now.
I was
mean,
shocked that it worked this week when when I just tried it. But
maybe the team over at Twitter hasn't figured out that they're still hitting it. You know?
yeah, who knows? But it's a way to automate some of those things I was talking about earlier that I do manually. Now it does, kind of require buy-in to the Busy app ecosystem a little bit, but BusyCal is a great application, and most people will just use Mail.app, and so it gives you a view into those other things, and it's a pretty nice feature in my opinion.
I mean, it really doesn't require that much buy-in either, because once again, the database is accessible by the other apps equally. So you can try it out for a month or two, and if you decide to go back, there's no harm, no foul. Like I use BusyCal in addition to Fantastical because I like Fantastical only renders one app window. Like if I want to have, and that's the one I work in all day. But sometimes I just want to have a full screen on my big monitor. Stephen, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the monitor I have is a little bigger than yours. So, but I can put like a year view on this gorgeous monitor.
Yeah.
And it looks great and give it its own screen. But Fantastical doesn't let me open two iterations of the app. I think there's something going on where that's really hard. And so I actually run BusyCal just with the full year view, and I keep that in a separate space. And I can just slide over to it if I want to see when I'm doing planning and stuff. But either way, I don't really use it as an operational calendar so much as just like that secondary view. But it doesn't matter because all these apps are hitting the same database, so you're good.
Another nice feature of Busy Contacts, it's also an Apple's Contacts app, is the ability to link and merge cards. So say that I have David Sparks, my coworker in the Relay FM Exchange server, which we don't have, but say that we did. But then I also have you in my personal iCloud, right? Busy Contacts gives you the option to view those together. It gives you the option to merge them into one card or to make sure that they have the same information on both. I think that's a situation a lot of people run into, right? Especially if you're in a really big organization, you have like tons of people on the work server, but some of those people are also friends, or you have their, maybe you have their work phone number on the work contact card, but you also have their personal cell phone number, and that's in your iCloud or whatever. It gives you a way to view all of that in one place. And, that's not, I don't think that was an issue back, 20 years ago when Apple first launched Address Book, but it's definitely something people deal with now.
Yeah, totally. I wonder how many people actually use these third-party contacts apps, though, now that we've kind of gone through them. I think people are much more likely to use a third-party calendar app than a contacts app because I think calendars are more important to a lot of people. And, we get back to this point. Apple's contacts app is clunky, but the notes field is there, and it's golden, and it works, One other app that I think is worthy of mention, it's kind of a unitasker contacts app. And there used to be a bunch more of these, but since Apple Contacts has kind of folded in the feature to find duplicates and stuff, there used to be a bunch of apps that dealt with that, but now you don't really need those anymore. So just keep it with the Apple app. But there's one called Importer for Contacts, and I downloaded and tested this out leading up to today's show. And, there's always somebody that has an Excel sheet with all their contacts in it. It's a thing, right? I think a lot of businesses do it too. And if you decide, I want to be able to use a grown-up contacts app instead of this Excel sheet, this app does that. It just takes an Excel sheet and turns it into contacts, and it does a really good job. It worked flawlessly for my tests. It's got a ton of positive reviews. And, if that's something that you're struggling with, there's an app for you.
It's very cool. This developer also has an app for exporting out of contacts. So if you need them in some other format, like CSV numbers. It can even deal with Outlook files. So like on Windows, Outlook stores its data in like a weirdo CSV format, and you can manage all of that with these apps. So this is cool. Something you probably don't need every day, but if you do end up in a situation like this, it gives you some options.
Yeah, if you've got the problem, this solves the problem. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by NetSuite. Go to netsuite.com/MPU for the leading integrated cloud business software suite and get a special one-of-a-kind financing offer, no interest, no payments for 6 months. Being a business owner or working closely with business owners means knowing your numbers. If your business earns millions or maybe tens of millions in revenue, stop what you're doing and take a listen, because NetSuite by Oracle has just rolled out the best offer. NetSuite gives you the visibility and control you need to make better decisions faster. And for the first time in NetSuite's 22 years as the #1 cloud financial system, you can defer payments of a full NetSuite implementation for 6 months. That's no payments and no interest for 6 months, and you can take advantage of this special financing offer today. NetSuite is #1 because they give your business everything you need in real time, all in one place, to reduce manual processes, boost efficiency, build forecasts, and increase productivity across every department. Having all the information you need in one place makes it so much easier to make decisions. I know as a business owner what a difference it can make and how much easier everything operates when information is available. It really means smart decisions can be made faster. And this NetSuite offer is extraordinary. So join the 33,000 companies who have already upgraded to NetSuite and gained visibility and control over their financials, inventory, HR, e-commerce, and more. If you've been sizing NetSuite up to make the switch, then you know this deal is unprecedented. No interest, no payments. Take advantage of this special financing offer at netsuite.com/MPU. That's netsuite.com/MPU to get the visibility and control you need to weather any storm. netsuite.com/MPU. Our thanks to NetSuite for their support of the Mac Power Users and all of Relay FM.
So let's talk a little bit about calendars. We did just do an episode on Fantastical not that long ago, and I think in that episode we spoke a little bit about how we use calendars, but I thought briefly we could recap that. You're a Fantastical user. You have lots of calendars. We're going to dig into that a little bit later. But what for you kind of pushes you over the edge away from calendar? You mentioned some things earlier, but what are some of the things that you think people should think of if they're looking at Apple's calendar app and say, you know what, maybe I do need more?
Well, I mean, the feature set is bigger. The big selling point for Fantastical, we're going to keep the Fantastical bit short because they got a whole show not that long ago. But the natural language input is amazing. The calendar sets where you can have, if you're someone like me who runs a lot of different calendars and you want the ability to slice and dice and group them together, that's a great feature. And increasingly for me, they have really turned into more of like a calendar service than just an app. Like I constantly use now the appointments features where you can send availability to people and say, pick one, and then you're on my calendar. And they do it in a non-creepy way. You know, a lot of these services want access to your calendar in order to be like kind of the web integrator or the place people go to book time with you. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to give anybody access to my calendar. Maybe it's my lawyer days bleeding over, but I just don't want to give open access like that. They do it all locally and they do it very reliably. And when I need to make an appointment with somebody, I hate that thing where you start emailing each other and say, well, I could do it on Tuesdays or Thursdays.
Yeah, it's the worst.
And instead I find that if I say, here's a link, you click in an email, it gives you 5 different options that I've provided you. You pick one. Fantastical updates my calendar. And the other thing it does is it holds, while it's pending, it gives me it puts those 5 options in gray saying, don't double book over this. You might have a meeting then, but you don't know yet. And then once they pick one, all of them disappear except the one they picked. It's just like just a bunch of little friction points. If you add them up, to me, it's worth the, I guess, $57 a year I pay for it. And I do pay for it, by the way. Somebody complained to me like, well, you don't even pay for it. No, I pay for it. If I use a service, I pay for it. It's just worth it to me. I mean, I don't know. I don't, there's a lot of things I don't do, but I do pay $57 a year to Fantastical to make my calendar easier.
Yeah. And I think we probably should talk about the price increase a little bit. We didn't get into it on the show. We had the founder of the company on, and we just felt like we're going to get the answer that was given publicly. And so we didn't push it. But as a recap, it's now, like you said, $57 a year, $475 a month. And they also have a family plan. So if you share this with other people, it can be a little bit cheaper. But that was like a 40% increase in our market here in US dollars. In other places, it was higher. And it did understandably turn a lot of people off. And I totally get that. For you, it sounds like the features you get out of it are worth the money for you. Some people, it crossed the line that it didn't anymore. But it is worth mentioning that they did that. It is the first increase they've had since moving to the subscription model, and I give them credit for that. And everything is more expensive in 2023 than it was 18 months ago. But it's a chunk of change.
Yeah, but it is more than an alternative calendar app that has natural language input, which is what it started life as.
Yeah.
It's become really in a lot of ways a service. And if you're using things like trying to schedule appointments and like the features, if I didn't use the power features, maybe I wouldn't pay for it. I don't know. But my advice would be, I think they have a free trial. Give it a try and see what you think. And everybody makes their own decisions. I would caution you, though, don't get too upset if it's not for you, or if you feel like it's not worth it, then you can vote with your feet. And that's just the way it is. I mean, I was just thinking about it today. We're recording later than normal. My daughter came in. I had to pick her up at the airport. And as it is, when your kids, you pick up your kids, they're like, hey, Dad, can we have lunch? And, your grown child wants to have food with you.
You're not saying
always
no.
buy them lunch, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you want to hear about their life and stuff. I totally spent more money today on lunch with her than I did on a year of Fantastical. You know what I mean? It's like there are things we spend money on without blinking, but when apps get above the $20 or $30 range, there's a little alarm bell that goes off. But in my case, it's worth it, and that's all. I mean, if it stops being worth it, I won't pay for it anymore.
Yeah.
But don't get too emotional about it. It's okay if it's not for you. And they made a business decision, and so be it. There are other options, and I guess we should get off this topic because I don't know what else to say about it. But the BusyCal is a great app too, and we mentioned that in the last segment. But that's also part of SetApp. You can buy it one time for $50. So a little bit less than 1 year of Fantastical, you can buy BusyCal. Or if you've got a SetApp subscription, you've got it already. And they've got a lot of great features in it.
They do. For me, I think about it the same way I think about the relationship between Busy Contacts and Apple's Contacts. It's a superset of what Calendar does. A couple of my favorite features about it, and I used BusyCal for years. Back
me too.
My last job, we had a lot of shared calendars, and like at the time, Apple Calendar kind of choked on that. It was like too much for it, so I switched to BusyCal for a long time. And like Busy Contacts, I think one of its most powerful features is the ability to customize its layout. So you can really choose what types of data you want on the different views, up to the point where, say that you've got an anniversary or spouse's birthday or something, you can use emoji or like some built-in clip art to like highlight that day on your calendar. It's like you really don't miss it, right? Like you see the balloon emoji, it's your spouse's birthday. No one else has that sort of thing, and it brings some fun to it. The other thing it does that Fantastical does as well, but some people really like the combination of contacts or of calendar and of tasks. I don't, but a lot of people do. And BusyCal, in addition to syncing with iCloud, Google Calendar, Office 365, CalDAV, et cetera, also syncs with the reminders database on your device. And so you can have your Apple reminders just in BusyCal on the sidebar. You can also integrate them into the different calendar views, even based on like due time. Lots of options again. It's pretty sweet how far you can customize this application.
Yeah, and the reminders integration with the calendar apps is awesome. Fantastical does do that as well. In fact, talking about subscriptions, when my renewal for OmniFocus was coming up, I thought about, do I still want this app? And I looked at reminders really hard. And one of the advantages would be that it could be integrated with my calendar. Now, ultimately, it was worth it for me to keep OmniFocus, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole today. But these are nice features, and I really feel like the difference is I suspect at Apple there's not a huge team working on the calendars and the contacts app. Their job is to get it out and shipped and get it working for people, and it does all those things. I'm sure that it's a minority of users that would complain that I have to use the mouse to edit a contact card.
Yeah.
But for those of us that do, it's a big deal, right? We just want to be more efficient on our devices. And companies like FlexiBits and I don't know what the company's name is anymore. BusyMac. BusyMac is, I think companies like this are looking for power users. The people who are listening to this show to say, no, we're going to give you something that has a bigger development team that tries to give you features that other people aren't willing to do. And like I forgot to mention earlier, the quarter view for me in Fantastical is awesome. And nobody has bothered to implement it in any other calendar company. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, that's another reason that they get my money every year. And, if Apple suddenly did what they're doing with some of their other apps and put a real team to work on contacts and like started bridging the gap here and bringing some of these features to the free option, maybe I would switch to contacts. I don't know. Or Apple's calendar app. But it doesn't appear that that's high on their list.
Yeah. BusyCal also has some natural language processing. Apple's own calendar app does as well, but
yeah.
Fantastical is still the best at it. Although BusyCal is really come a long way when I was playing with it today. It's pretty close to Fantastical, and both just wipe the floor with Apple's implementation.
Yeah, they're both great. I mean, honestly, if you try either one of those apps and you're serious about your calendar, you're gonna probably want it, and then it's just a question of picking which one fits you better. And I think if the BusyCal and Fantastical people were here today, they'd say the same thing. Use the one that you like. I mean, it's hard enough managing a calendar. Don't do it with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, and these apps both have trials, and so you can get in there and spend some time with it. And they are on the surface kind of similar, right, in terms of just the bullet list of features, but they treat those features differently, and the layouts are different. And you may find what you need in one of them that really kind of sticks with you. This episode of MPU is made possible by Things from Cultured Code. It's an award-winning to-do app that is awesome if you're an Apple Shortcuts user. You're going to love the latest update to Things if you are, because the team at Cultured Code has adopted the new App Intents framework and added 9 new actions that greatly extend what's possible. In fact, you can now completely automate your workflow with Things on the Mac, iPad, and iPhone. For example, you can create full-blown projects with their headings and to-dos, edit existing data. You can duplicate a template project with just a tap, grab links to your items, and of course, you can pull data into and out of Things with other apps. There are just so many creative ways to use shortcuts with Things. The examples here really only scratch the surface. So head on over to their website. It's thingsapp.com, and they have this cool gallery of shortcuts to show you what's possible. You can also download a free trial for macOS. Things, of course, is renowned for its fantastic design. It is the most beautiful task manager on the market, but it's really powerful as well. And the team has added loads of other great features over the years that you should check out. So head on over to the website, thingsapp.com, to learn all about the great features and to download a free trial for your Mac. Of course, you can also find it in the App Store. Just search for Things. Whatever you want to accomplish in life, Things can help you get there. Try Things at thingsapp.com. You won't regret it. Our thanks to Things and Cultured Code for supporting this episode of MPU.
So when we did the show about Fantastical, I shared my secret about my mini calendars, and I got a lot of feedback from the listeners about that. Most of them were saying that I need to get help, but I just want to just restate it now, just to be belligerent. I've been doing this like 2 years now. I am not changing. I'm going to be using all these calendars. It's just so convenient for me to be able to group things together in ways I want very quickly. So the quick summary is I've got different calendars. Some of them are what I call planning, and some of them are more activity-based. But I can, with just a few buttons, quickly get at a full planning calendar for what I'm doing, and then push another button, and then I get at the actual work that I'm doing. People in the labs are probably tired of this. I've released some videos sharing some of my shortcuts and things I do to make this all work together. But man, I was shocked at how many people thought it was nuts. I feel like this is actually the only way to do this stuff if you're managing a lot of different projects.
Yeah, I get it. I definitely have multiple calendars, not to the extent that you do. And of course, you're using an app that has calendar sets, right? So you can turn sets on and off, right? If you're in labs mode, you can turn all those on and hide everything else.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff. You also work more closely with the team than I do. It's like Mike and I don't share a calendar. Like if we have something we need each other to do, we just send each other an invite. Same reason we don't have a shared task list between us, right? We just don't like being in each other's data sets.
Yeah, but, I get it.
But yeah, no, I get what you're doing too. And I think where most people end up with this is in the family, right? And I spoke about this, I think, on the Fantastical episode, but we've got several family calendars, right? I have a personal and a work one that's in iCloud. And then we have a family calendar. We have one for each kid. Now that our kids are because our daughter got her first iPhone recently, it's a whole thing in my house. She can see a bunch of these calendars, right? So now we have like a one that's parents only, like stuff that they don't need to see on the family calendar, right? Like they don't need to see, if we have a call with our accountant or something, right? Put it on there. But that's where most people end up with it. And even though I don't use as many as you do, I'm a big believer in this because it can help you. For me, it helps me visually very quickly sort of parse a day or a week, right? So my work calendar is red, my personal one is blue. And if I see a day that has a bunch of red on it, it maybe doesn't even matter what they are, but I know, okay, that day is going to be a heavy work day, right? There's something back to back to back these days. And I can very quickly glean that information and then, make decisions on it. And I can turn off the calendars I don't need to see, right? So we have some other calendars I have that I leave turned off almost all the time. If you're ever on the Relay website, on the live page, that view of upcoming live shows is fed from a Google Calendar in my Relay FM like G Suite account. I don't ever need to see that calendar. Like I know when my shows are. I don't really care when other shows are streaming live, but sometimes I need to make an adjustment for somebody, so I leave it off all the time. You've just taken that to a much bigger level.
Yeah. I mean, getting back to what you're saying, I have people I work with. I mean, basically, I share a lot of them with the people that help me, and it's more for their information than anything else. I have Liana helps me a lot of times with the post-production on the labs videos, and JF helps me with the post-production on the field guide stuff. So they need to kind of see when I think something should ship so they can, plan their work accordingly. And this is a really easy way to do it. And we looked at different options of like putting the dates, the target dates in the related craft notes and things. But then if something changes, then I've got to go find the note and I've got to change it and whether or not they see it. This system I find so much easier. I just move them around on the date. And the combination of that quarter view in Fantastical plus the planning calendars actually allows me to do that very fast. And whenever those things are in sync, that's when I'm at my best. And when they're like out of sync where they're not updated, that means that's a warning sign for me that I need to slow down and kind of get things together again. And just to restate the planning calendar idea, because what I was surprised at when we talked about last show, I didn't hear from a single listener who was like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to start doing it. But I find it I find it so transformative. I feel like maybe I didn't communicate it well, because I think this could be really helpful no matter what you do to pay for your shoes. And the idea is for each substantive calendar, and I'm going to use, nerdy home content creator examples, but you could use this as a lawyer or a salesperson or whatever. But let's say, for example, the MacSparky Labs. I have a planning calendar, and on that, I list the published dates. Everything on the planning calendar is a full day event. And that's all the major things I'm doing as part of the labs. The next meetup, the next deep dive, the publication date for this video I'm working. And all that stuff shows up on that calendar as all day events, because it's a separate calendar from the calendar where I write down the actual event itself. That the deep dive is going to be from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or whatever. That's not on the planning calendar. That's on the labs calendar. But the labs planning calendar just has all day events for each one of those things. And then I can always go to that view in monthly or quarterly views where I usually see it and say, show me the planning for the MacSparky stuff. And I can see at a glance all the big items coming at me in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And if I need to make adjustments, I can do that. Another example is I have a shortcut I run when we schedule an episode of Mac Power Users. So there will be the calendar event where you and I record it. There may be an event where I plan or work on the outline, but there's also a planning event, which is an all-day event for recording that show. And I see that on that planning calendar. And so this gives me the ability to strip all the noise out of my calendar and just see what are the big things heading my way. And I just find it so useful. And I just kind of stumbled into it because I couldn't talk the Fantastical guys into adding a feature, and because I wanted them to say, well, allow me to duplicate an event as an all-day event so I can see it. And they thought it was nuts. They're probably right. But actually making it a separate planning calendar allows me to filter it. So it's actually better the way I'm doing it than if they had added a feature. But I find that just really useful. And now I've been doing it over a year. And this is, it started out as an experiment, but now it's just the way of doing business. Does that make sense to you, Stephen? Am I explaining it okay?
Yeah, I think you are. I think it's an example of people finding things that work for them. Like one feature my wife loves in Calendar is the when to leave alert.
Yeah.
Right? So
that.
there's an address in the event. It's like, hey, you need to leave in 15 minutes. I despise that alert. I don't know what it is about that alert that drives me up the wall. But it's like, I set basically everything as a 15-minute warning on my calendar, if anything. And I don't know. It's like people are different and want different things.
Yeah, I actually think they should double down on that, and they should make it time to drive to something, but also time to drive back. I mean, that should
put
at
it
least
on the
be an
back
option.
side of it.
Well, both. If you've got to go somewhere that's 60 miles away, you should have the option to say, well, give me an hour and a half to get there and an hour and a half to get back. So you don't double book yourself. You don't put, an event in when you're actually on the road coming back. I don't know. My thoughts on calendars are probably too, nerdy. I don't know. What's the word? But and I think that's maybe why my idea about these playing calendars didn't really land for anybody. But man, it really helps me. I don't know what else to say.
No, I totally get it.
Either way, there's contacts and calendars with a nice 2023 coat of paint on it. Let us know what apps you're using, what services you're using, and cool ways you're using your contacts and calendars in the forum over at talk.macpowerusers.com. We'd love to hear. We're getting ready to do a feedback show pretty soon. If you get it up soon, you may end up on a show. We want to thank our sponsors today, TextExpander, 1Password, NetSuite, and Things from Cultured Code. And we will see you next time.